Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel, where I normally talk about a movie, but here in December of 2023, I've sort of taken a little break from constant movie watching, and I've been in a reading mood. So what do I read when I'm not watching movies? Generally speaking, I read books about movies and movie history. So I thought I'd do one more video here in 2023 before we get back to movies in 2024, discussing some books I've read recently that are really good. The first one was published in 1995, and this is A Talent for Trouble by Jan Herman. And this is the life of Hollywood's most acclaimed director, and this is, in fact, William Wyler. Wyler, most acclaimed in the sense of Academy Awards because he got nominated more times than any other film director ever has, probably ever will, and I think 11 or 12 nominations. He did win 3 times. I think John Ford has the most Best Director. I think he has 5, but certainly Wyler, in his time, was one of the most acclaimed directors there ever was, to be sure. And he had a rather a long apprenticeship in film. He came from Austria. He didn't have much money, didn't have any money at all, but his uncle was Carl Laemmle. And Carl Laemmle was the head of Universal Pictures, and he was known as somebody who had his whole family on his payroll at one time or another, or so it seemed. But you had to start at the bottom, and so William Wyler did in fact start in the bottom. He learned all aspects of filmmaking. In the 1920s, he graduated to director, but he was churning out programmer westerns. We don't think of William Wyler as a western director. When the sound era came, I don't think he made a western. I guess he made The Plainsman, and then he later on made The Big Country. But in silent film days, he was basically making westerns like every 2 days, the 2-day schedule of westerns. But then in the 1930s, he was making quality movies and that were being noticed. And I've talked on my channel about a film called Counselor at Law from 1933, which really was the impetus for me to learn more about William Wyler and to watch more of his films. And I did a 3 film series on his films from the 50s in The Heiress, The Detective Story, The Desperate Hours, all 3 of which I thought were absolutely superb movies. But he was he was known for other movies than that. In the 1930s, he would collaborate with Bette Davis, I think on 4 films. But the 3 that I'll probably be talking about in 2024, Jezebel, The Letter, and The Little Foxes. He and Bette Davis had a love affair. Bette Davis said all her life, she said that William Wyler was the love of her life. But Wyler, who was quite a ladies' man, wanted to really settle down and raise a family, and so he when he married for the second time, that was the marriage for the rest of his life. And there's all kinds of films that when you look over the list of his films, you don't always necessarily associate them with William Wyler, but movies like Wuthering Heights, Mrs. Miniver, Best Years of Our Life. I talked about the films that I did discussions on from the 50s, and which culminated in that decade, culminating in Ben-Hur, big time Academy Award film. The Chariot was remembered today mostly for The Chariot Race, which William Wyler didn't have much to do. Although William Wyler in the silent film Ben-Hur, he actually worked on the Chariot Race as an assistant. But that was Joachim Knut. And Ben-Hur isn't really remembered for the dramatic parts of that film. Then later on, he would have Funny Girl, which was a big commercial success. His last film was The Liberation of L.B. Jones, which I saw in the movie theater. I have not seen since. It was not a success, either critically or commercially, but it's a film that I really like to go back and see. And This book has lots of great photographs in it. Here we see Betty Davis, Henry Fonda in Jezebel, and that is the notorious red dress. However, this was a black and white film. And here is Betty Davis with glasses. This is from the letter, I think. My favorite Betty Davis performance, and probably my favorite William Wyler movie itself. And so the one aspect that I do want to talk about before I move on to the next, it has a tie-in with the next, is that Wyler was in fact a target of the House on Un-American Activities Committee. There was one certain investigator that was determined to get Wyler to be, brought before the committee and forced to name names. But Wyler was so successful, and that he, the studio wasn't going to allow this to happen. And Wyler, of course, was never a communist. He was never against un-American. In fact, in World War II, he signed up right away. He filmed a documentary called Memphis Belle, one of the great documentaries of World War II, in which he flew missions, very dangerous missions with these bomber crews. In fact, he in one episode, in one bombing run, he lost most of his hearing. One of his aides was shot down in one of the other bombers, and I think he did something like 6 or 8 of these missions. So he certainly made an impact in World War II for America. But of course, when right-wing nationalism came to prominence in the Red Scare and the beginning days of the Cold War, everybody was a target. Wilder was a liberal, and he supported liberal causes. He was against the blacklist. He supported the Hollywood 10. But he was American. He was an American patriot through and through. But that didn't stop the investigations of Hollywood people that were basically just liberal. Now here's the next book, and this is a tie-in from that particular theme. And I got to admit, I'm very interested in the blacklist as a manifestation of right-wing nationalism that obviously we're seeing today, a resurgence of that we're seeing today. But it's been there before, always percolating below the surface. And in this book, Charlie Chaplin versus America by Scott Eyman, When Art, Sex, and Politics Collided. This is, in fact, a biography of Chaplin. Scott Eyman says there's so many. What would be my particular point of view in discussing Chaplin? So we do get to see Chaplin coming to America and some, rather abbreviated biography of all the films that he was making, his transition into the sound era where he stayed silent. Charlie Chaplin thought that his English voice would not play well. When the tramp speaks, everybody's going to be disappointed. He speaks like an Englishman. But this book mostly concentrates on Charlie Chaplin's politics, which were very, there wasn't much to them. I mean, he did support what would be called today left-wing causes. He did support the Russians during World War II. They were, in fact, our allies. He was never a member of the Communist Party. And so Chaplin always thought it was funny that they thought he was a communist, because he was never a member of the Communist Party, and nobody accused him of being. I think there was one very shady character who said that he saw Chaplin paying dues, and this man was totally, even amongst the House on American Activity investigators, they knew he was just a congenital liar. But Chaplin will always say, they think I'm a communist. Chaplin was one of the richest men in America, in Hollywood at least, and he had a capitalist portfolio. He invested in the stock market. They accused him, because Chaplin never became an American citizen. He lived there, I think, 40 years, and he never became an American citizen. So that was a sign that he was un-American. Chaplin didn't believe he was a citizen of the world. Well, just saying that, is enough to, for nationalists to say, well, what are you doing here? You're a citizen of the world. We want Americans, and you made your money here, and you should be a citizen. And that too, I know my father, for instance, who was very right-wing, he couldn't stand Charlie Chaplin. And the FBI would release all kinds of, they had a 2,000-page portfolio of their investigations. They never found anything that showed he was ever a communist or even cared about communism. So they went after his sex life. And the FBI would plant all kinds of misinformation with gossip columnists, like Hedda Hopper in particular. Hedda Hopper really had it in for Charlie Chaplin, but other people like Ed Sullivan. I always knew Ed Sullivan from his television variety show. I didn't know that he was this columnist, and they would feed him, and these were almost all lies. And then the FBI set up a paternity suit, and this I think is the most interesting part of the book, because I didn't know. I heard that he had been on trial for in a paternity suit, but Scott Eyman gives you the details on how the FBI coached one of Charlie Chaplin's girlfriends into telling all kinds of stories about him. And in the paternity suit, the blood test showed that Chaplin was not the father. Now, he had an affair with her for a few months. She was also the girlfriend of John Paul Getty. She had a lot. She was quite something, but Chaplin lost. The first trial, I think, was a hung jury, and the second trial he lost, even though the paternity, and this was a paternity case, even though the blood test showed that he wasn't the father. But it was not encased in California law yet. It would be a few years later when that was what was seen as evidence. So he lost the case and had to pay child support for the child's growing up. But so he made some films. Modern Times was seen by the political aspect was seen as, that he's anti-capitalism. The Great Dictator was also seen, and even his early films were seen as he's anti-authoritarian. And these right-wing nationals of the 50s, they wanted authoritarianism just like they seem to do today. And so, and then he made Monsieur Verdoux, which was not, it did fairly well. And then Limelight. And when Limelight came out, and this is 52, Chaplin wanted to go to London with his family for the London opening. And he was told that the FBI and the government wouldn't let him back into the country. They would revoke his passport. But the Immigration Service said that there's no way they legally can keep Charlie Chaplin from coming back to America. So he knew he could actually come back. Later on, I think the Immigration Service, I think, did ban him from coming back. But he had it with America. He couldn't understand why so many Americans hated him. Probably the majority of Americans couldn't stand Charlie Chaplin by the time of the 1950s. So he goes to Switzerland. He was criticized, and that's the sex part was the paternity case, but also his affairs with much younger women. And in fact, he married Eugene O'Neill's 18-year-old daughter, and he was 54, but then they were together for almost 40 years, I guess, with 8 children and constant companions together. She was an American citizen, so she could come back, because when Charlie Chaplin went to live in Switzerland, he had he had his own studio in Hollywood. All that stuff had to be taken care of. They had a big mansion for his communist activities. But he does come back in the end. He does come back to get his Oscar. Here he is as in The Great Dictator, exploiting his remarkable resemblance to Adolf Hitler. Here he is in Limelight, where he is playing a kind of washed-up vaudevillian. And here is a famous scene where Buster Keaton, who has a supporting role in Limelight. And I remember here he is back in the 1980s getting his honorary Oscar. And the thing about Chaplin, he actually loved America. He did. He credited America. I would have never been the great success. He was so poor in England, but he doesn't believe he would just been a vaudevillian had he stayed in England. Coming to America, and so he had this sort of love and then ultimately hate because he just couldn't stand the way he believed he was hounded out of America. And the third book I want to talk about, just briefly, is Daughter of the Dragon by Hunta Wang, Anna May Wong's Rendezvous with American History. So this is another kind of outsider story where Anna May Wong, living as a kind of impoverished, her parents had a laundry, the proverbial Chinese laundry, where she grew up, but in the early part of her life, they were making a lot of films playing up the exotic nature of Chinatown in Los Angeles. So Anna May Wong was mesmerized by the movies. Her dream was to be in the movies, and she did. She made it into silent film. She was she had starring roles and she was in Thief of Baghdad with Douglas Fairbanks. She had, and it's a remarkable story. Now, I haven't finished it all, but this is just a beautifully, beautifully written book. I'm just zooming through this book, and there's a number of films today that are still available. In fact, Kino has an Anna May Wong set. And then they have a film called Picadilly, and this is the cover art or cover photo that they use for that film, and emphasizing Anna May Wong, her legs, and even as a teenager, she was at parties that with all the great Hollywood Hollywood film royalty. She had an affair. She was 16 or 17, had an affair with a Hollywood director who was very famous at the time. But she never found that in sound film. She did not have as much of a success or an enduring career. I knew her mostly from Joseph von Sternberg's Shanghai Express, which she stars with Marlene Dietrich. She's really excellent at that. But I'm definitely going to have to find some more Anna May Wong films to watch. And that this is a recent. I think it just came out. My library's new book section. Really, anybody who is interested in Anna May Wong, but also in the Chinese community, the history of the Chinese community in LA, from which he comes. This is really, and it's really well-written book. Now, just briefly, some other books I've been reading. I've been reading Donna Leone's Inspector Brunetti series. This is Doctored Evidence that I'm about to start. I just wanted to mention there's no movies ever been made from her feature films that have ever been made, as far as I can tell, from her novels, which are set in Venice, and they have fantastic characters in it. Brunetti and his family. He's a police officer with a happy family, living in Venice. But Donna Leone portrays Italy and Venice and the politics and corruption everywhere. It is institutionalized corruption. Brunetti seeks justice in this kind of world, and his wife is a literature professor, and she teaches Henry James, Anthony Trollope. The kids are excellent. Every character in Donna Leone's Brunetti series is fantastic. But I'm almost finished in watching. There is one television show, and it's German. Now, Donna Leone is translated all around the world, very popular novelist everywhere, but she never allowed her books to be translated into Italian. Mostly, I guess, because she, maybe because she is so critical of Italian society and the ingrained corruption within it. Um, and there's no, it's really, I guess she doesn't want to have an English language adaptation of her novels, but she allowed a German television series. I think there's like 18 and of these episodes. So, and they're very faithful to the novels, and the characters are just as good in the television show as they are in the book, just perfectly cast. But it's all in German, and it's set all in Venice. So you have to get used to that. We're in Italy, everybody speaks German, and all the actors appear to be German, all the supporting actors that come in for these different parts, they all look like they're German, and yet somehow it works. It does, it's just, and the shots of Venice, if you love Venice, this is the TV show to watch. And these are not short, these are basically full-length movies, 18-hour-and-a-half movies, highly recommended in the US. They are streaming on Canopy. Okay, I went on a little bit long, but this will be, I said my last video would be the last one of the year, but I said I might do a book one, so this is it. I'll be back in 2024 with movies, but until then, Happy New Year.